Chicago. This is Khalid here. This is a very special episode of the Spawn on Me podcast. We are not doing our normal show this week because we were lucky enough to have the dope folks over at Kitfox share their panel. Victoria Tran, massive shout out and love to you for sharing your panel, Career in Games and Disappointing Your Ethnic Parents, with us this week. That talks about the trials and tribulations of what it takes to be a person in games when you are growing up in a household that doesn't necessarily want you to become a game developer. We've heard conversations around this often throughout some of our own circles. And this wonderful panel kind of digs into that in a real way, talking with folks like Ika, who's the creative director over at Outerloop Games, Joe Tirado, who's the communications and marketing over at Softworks, and also Chris Compendio, who's over doing PR over at Uppercut. Take a listen to this wonderful audio. It's fantastic to be able to get this stuff from PAX East and have Victoria share this with us and our audience here. So massive, again, love and shout to you. And again, tell me what you think about it. Enjoy the audio and enjoy the show. Thanks so much. Peace.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, do they know what I do? I don't even think they know I'm here right now. So as far as they know, I play video games and I write about them, but that's as far as they know. In terms of the actual, the larger games industry and how that works, they have no clue, and I always have to kind of explain it in the context of other industries. Like the idea that there are people paid to review video games was just totally alien to them. And I just said, people write movie reviews, right? It's kind of like that, but for video games. But other than that, story time after cons takes a long time just to explain like what actually goes on there. Because when you say, oh, you're in video games, it's like, oh, do you like play video games for a living, like an esports person? And not exactly. It's a lot more comprehensive than that.
My mom knows what I do for sure, but I kind of went through this really crazy route to actually get to where I'm at right now, working on a game. I'm kind of even surprised that my career path is taking me to the place where I actually work on video games. I did do games journalism before that, and I think that was where it was kind of like, whoa, why are you doing this? Why did you switch jobs to be a games journalist? Like, that doesn't sound very good. I see some games journalists here. Sorry, I'm not insulting you. But yeah, my mom knows what I do, but I think it was hard to sell her on the vision of getting to where I wanted to be by these other methods, which took quite a while. So.
Yeah, my parents, so the context they know of games is my brother screaming at the screen while he was playing Street Fighter. So all they imagine me doing is screaming at a screen like at Street Fighter. I'm like, no, there's other games. They're like, I know. It's shooty games or it's the fighting games, and that's about like their knowledge of it.
As in there are other games to scream at?
Yeah, as long as you're fighting and screaming at it, right, then you're playing games right, according to them.
I mean, she's not wrong.
Oh no. But yeah, so that's kind of the context of that. So they also have no idea what I'm doing. But this kind of leads me into my next question, which was, did you tell them like beforehand like what you wanted to do as a career? Because not everyone, I guess, thinks they're going to go into games. Like originally, I was going to go into healthcare. So when they found out I was in games instead, and they're still in denial about it, they're like, oh, she's going through a phase. And soon she'll go back to healthcare. I'm like, I'm not. I don't want to do it anymore. Is there did you do something beforehand, and were they like super disappointed when they found out you were doing whatever else games is?
So they had all their hopes on my older brother, and then he decided not to be a lawyer.
Oof.
So then, like, the eye of Sauron was on me. I've been in art all my life. That's all I love to do, and they were hoping I'd go into engineering of some kind. Lawyer, engineer, doctor, right?
Yeah.
What are the options?
You can do dentist.
Yeah. So I got into art school, and they're just like, okay, is this a thing you can do? How do you make money and any of that stuff? So they think they understand the art aspect of it. Oh, you can draw stuff. You paint stuff, whatever, but I don't think they quite understand how that translates into a living. I mean, they're just happy that I eat, and
Eating is good.
I can pay rent or have a house or whatever. And so they're like, okay, we get it. There's some success there.
Mm-hmm.
There's money there, so you're doing okay.
So not only do I have Asian parents, but I have doctor parents.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. So I guess growing up as a kid, I felt like I had that expectation just by, like, inheriting that. If you look at, for some reason, they made a little documentary for 5th grade graduation, and they asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I guess I said doctor or something like that, even though I'm very squeamish. But at some point, I don't know if it was high school or college, I figured out that writing was kind of more my thing, whether it was prose writing or screenwriting, whatever have you. I used to write a lot of short stories as a kid, and I kind of went on that track in college. I had a creative writing degree, but my parents were kind of like, okay, yeah, we support you, but maybe you want to do like an additional major just as like kind of a safety net. So I did information systems, and I'm not sure how many people know what information systems is. I went through like 4 years of that, and I still don't really know what it is. But after I graduated, I think I just kind of accidentally fell into games journalism, and my parents, having seen, they saw some, let's say they have some colleagues, some doctor colleagues who saw their own children kind of pressured into that field of work, and it did not end well for them. A lot of burnouts. A lot of breakdowns, and people, and like those kids just kind of ended up pursuing their passion. So I think my parents just very silently relented. So even though they have no clue what I do, they're like, yeah, no, keep on doing you as long as you have a home and are eating and whatnot. So
Yeah, I think the bar is usually just like, can you eat food every day?
It's always the food part.
What's the food part?
Are you eating? How many people get that question? Probably a lot. Yeah. Are you actually eating real food? So for me, I think I like doubly disappointed my family because, immigrant family who like moved here, and they worked super hard to like give me an opportunity to make something of myself, which I think I did. But at the time, I was also in the same boat of like trying to be creative. I was like, oh man, I like want to make cool stuff. But it didn't, I always felt like I had to reach this bar of making good on their sacrifice and feeling like I was making good on that, which, pushed me into areas where maybe I was like not really excited about stuff. So I settled on trying to be an engineer because I wanted to work on airplanes, but I actually really just wanted to fly airplanes. I was really jazzed about that. And so when I was graduating high school, I told my mom that I wanted to go into the Air Force, and that like killed her. She did not want that to happen at all. So that was super disappointing because she just didn't want me to like be in harm's way in any way possible. And so then my compromise to that was like, well, then I want to go to art school, and she like kind of had to say yes to that. It was either art school or potentially flying airplanes. And so I mean, my mom's not like, she's super into art. But I think she went through the process of following that path, and it didn't really go anywhere for her. So I think she just didn't want me to necessarily do that same thing and then end up being in a job that, like, maybe she feels like she wanted to do something else, but she had no choice because she had kids. And so it was up to me then to, like, prove to her that I could make something of the art and sort of marketing thing. So
that almost sounds like a threat, like an ultimatum, like, take me to art school or else I'm going to go into the Air Force.
It's kind of
Look, apparently that's the way to do it.
Kids, if you're
I didn't do
listening,
that.
this is what you...
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think like the whole guilt, but also wanting to make up to a sacrifice that they've made for you is very common that I've like seen in people. Like I definitely feel the same way. Like if I'm ever tired, I'm like, oh, my parents did so much more. But yeah. So what advice do you have for someone who wants to get into, maybe not even the games industry, but like a creative industry, let's say, but their family is kind of pressuring them not to, or very heavily is disapproving of them, and it's very hard to ignore your parents and just do whatever you want to do. So do you have any advice for kind of getting over that, or maybe helping them understand?
Somebody else want to start?
Sure. For me, I I didn't do a great job at this when I was going through this process, but I saw the end goal of where I wanted to be. And I would just think, as for advice, like, make sure you plan that thing out and put that in front of your parents. Don't just, like, I went to art school and was like, I'm a general art person. What does that even mean? I tried painting, I tried graphic design, I tried photography. I did want to be a creative director at the end of the day, and I wanted to go down that path, but I didn't really communicate that really well. So I would say, if you want to move into games, if you want to move into a creative field of any kind, you should just like look at it yourself and really plan that out. You shouldn't just like jump into it. And furthermore, you should then take that plan that you put in front of yourself and then share that with your family. I think it'll be really helpful for both parties.
Yeah, it's hard for me to give advice because I feel like I low-key lucked out in that I never really got a lot of pushback. But, I still got that kind of indifference or uncertainty, and I felt like I had to make, I don't know if this is advice I would give, so I'm kind of curious what you all think about this, but I felt like I had to make concessions in a way. So, for example, that whole college degree thing, I was a creative writer, but they're like, oh, maybe you also get like a quote-unquote practical skill in your belt to kind of act as a safety net if that writing thing doesn't work out. I always try to reassure them and just try to be open and transparent with them, I guess, is the base advice I would give at the very least.
I have no good advice. I dropped out of art school and started working at Bethesda at like 19, so it was just dumb luck. I grew up in Maryland, and Bethesda was down the street, and I don't know, I was teaching myself stuff, and so my parents were happy I was like had a job, more than like a Costco job that I had before. So, but they were disappointed I didn't finish school. Mostly, I think. Well, yeah, I don't have good advice because I moved out after that. So,
Good job. Yeah, I think my advice for it, and it's obviously different depending on parents and how open they are to it. But I've tried to approach it from the fact I try to look at why they're so angry at me or like whatever. And it's not that they're mad at me, it's that they're scared that I won't be in a place where I can feed myself and they can't take care of me because they'll be dead, eventually. Oh, that sounded really weird to say out loud. But, it's going to happen. I'm sorry. Yeah, like Joe said, it's one, planning out something and communicating that with them because they can't see the steps what you're taking, and I would tell them everything I was doing, hey, look at this accomplishment, look at this accomplishment, look at this accomplishment. I wouldn't tell them when I failed, obviously, so whatever. But also just talking to them, understanding that they're not angry at me necessarily, they're more concerned than anything, and trying to empathize with that because I can't empathize with the fact that they escaped on a boat from Vietnam. I've never done that, but I can understand them not wanting me to be in the same position that they were in.
Yeah, if I can add, yeah, I mean they're upset at me just because they care about make sure I'm okay, right? That's their because they sacrifice a lot to work random jobs in my case and provide for us, and they want to make sure we have a good education. And I have kids now. I have a high schooler. He's in 9th grade, and so I'm going through this. How do I do it differently, or do I do it differently? And I'm I don't necessarily believe college is the right path for some kids. It might not be his passion. So right now, we're trying to keep things open and make sure he, I want him to do well at school so he has more options, and that's really been my message. But it's hard.
It is hard. I'm sure it's hard. And it's like the thing where they were always surviving, and now we're just trying to have a better life and whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, so, definitely express gratitude to your parents whenever you get the chance. And I'm still living with my parents right now. I'm living rent-free, so I feel like I obviously do have gratitude, but I feel like I have to. Because, my parents kind of had a similar experience. I mean, they did medical school in the Philippines, and they came over here to the States because my mom wasn't really digging it in the Philippines anymore. And of course, my dad had to kind of do all the exams and whatnot again. Started off as like working at a laundromat, I think. And then once he finally scored a gig, I think we literally drove from California to Pennsylvania in like a week. And now I'm here. I didn't really have to do any of that. So always just letting your parents know that you recognize what they've done for you and that you really appreciate it, I think is like kind of the, there's the practical part of laying out your plan, but there's also the emotional aspect of making sure that you have an understanding of each other, that they know what you want to do and you know like what they've done for you to get there.
Can I actually add something to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another thing that I would suggest, like advice that I learned myself, was not to be afraid to also like ask for help. Like in this situation, maybe you're feeling like you have to prove something to your parents, or that you've made this choice and like you got to go with it and you have to like succeed. I had many adjustments that I made, and I had to like move back in for a little bit and like figure that out. And although that felt bad at the time, like it also felt nice to know that they were still there, that my parents were supporting me, and I think my mom actually really liked it, so that was nice for her, I think. But yeah, like don't be afraid. Don't create an atmosphere where it's now like you're trying to prove a point, because that's just going to drive you further apart. Like get that help if it's available to you from your parents. Like they're going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you think your background and your upbringing has helped you now in the industry or in life in general, honestly?
I think for me, it's a work ethic. Like I saw how hard, like my parents had to restart careers essentially, right? So I worked odd jobs when we first moved to the States, and they, they worked all the time, and they weren't around because of that too. But I also understand now, like the sacrifice they made for the kids, for us to have more opportunities. So that work ethic has certainly carried me through, and that guilt, I think.
So much guilt.
But if I feel like I'm not applying myself enough, I think about that, and the guilt certainly is a big part of it too.
That's a complex question for me, because I feel like I've worn so many faces. So there's the whole child of immigrants aspect, and then they wanted me to get a good education, so they sent me to private school. I went to like an all-boys, like coat and tie, very waspy kind of school. And I went to a fairly progressive college, which was kind of culture shock, and that just having all those different experiences, I guess, just kind of gave me perspective, especially when we're talking about the games industry, of how the conversation about diversity is. Where was I going with that? You know what I mean. I don't know. Just
it's
take
fine.
the jokes.
No, I saw where you're going with that.
Yeah. You can continue that if you want.
So, having a diverse background, having a different cultural background is actually really valuable. And so part of the work that we do with Latinx is trying to like tell people that that's really valuable. There are plenty of jobs out there that are looking for people with different perspectives. And so don't shy away from that idea that like you need to hide that or you need to like fit in better. As you were kind of mentioning, places are getting more progressive. They want to see different views from people. They want different people in the room that can give them that different perspective. I think for me personally, the work ethic thing is like kind of a double-edged sword for me, because I feel like I embodied that and I did that, but then that was actually like kind of bad for me at a certain point.
Yeah, same for me early on. Yeah.
I like didn't know when to stop, and I measured myself based on like how much harder I was working than other people. It's not really healthy at all. So definitely like take that work ethic and see that thing, but also understand like when it's your time to kind of take a break and worry about yourself as well. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think, the work ethic thing, definitely a thing. I also embody that a lot, but it is a source of burnout.
How many panels are you doing this PAX?
8. It's fine. It's great. But I think like another interesting thing I've seen is when I see games that draw from their own culture, right? Like you see a lot of games set in North America, set in, I don't know, ancient Egypt, but like when Red Candle came out with like Detention, which was a game set in like Taiwanese mythology. I thought that was so interesting. Like having those different perspectives, like those different stories that you can bring to the table. That's something I want to see more of for sure. And isn't your game based on?
Yeah, it's all South Asian
Yeah.
culture and themes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I want to see more games to explore like those different ideas and those different paths. And I think that's such a huge strength of coming from a different background is that you think of these things and you consider them and you know them intimately usually. Yeah, that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. And I guess, because my outlet kind of looks for those kinds of games that kind of draw from those personal perspectives, that's really what kind of directs me is, especially at a place like PAX, like I'm kind of just looking for those personal games, especially coming from different cultures and just trying to kind of immerse myself in those.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever anything, and maybe you don't have an answer for this, kind of throwing it out there, was there ever anything like a relative or a parent said about your work or your job that made you really upset or sad?
There's one time, so we did a bunch of offshoot of Bethesda. We were doing some web games, and it was like, I don't know, season 3 of Survivor, so it was for CBS. So my uncle's like, oh, you did work for CBS? Well, that's impressive. Like, it's like a small web game, really didn't matter, but they were more impressed with sort of the affiliation with a company they knew more than anything else. And that was probably like the smallest game I ever worked on, but like, it's like the prestige of, my folks, especially my family. So it's very much about like the school you went to or what big companies you worked for or things like that. And that still bothers me, but whatever.
Not so much anything that's bothered me or upset me, but I always try to keep a lot of things about what I do close to the chest because I think they're more worried about, like they've accepted like what I do conceptually, but it's just from a purely practical and economical standpoint. So, for example, I'm here at PAX and they're like, oh, did someone pay to go there? And like, no. So I don't know, I kind of try to pivot away from conversations about money and practicality because I just don't like hearing the worry for them, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to like reassure them, but by kind of omitting stuff, I guess, which is not really advice I would give, since I literally just said, hey, be open and honest and transparent with your parents.
I definitely ran into moments, not necessarily with my mom. My mom was really good at trying to adjust and support me in the things that I wanted to do. But definitely like the generation above that was pretty tough for me. My grandma was like, she saw my mom go through the art thing and then get churned out of that pretty quickly. And so she did not want me to do that at all. And then she also was like not down with my life choices. Like I went to a private high school. I got good SAT scores because I thought that would be good for the Air Force. And then when I decided to be an artist, then I got like a lip piercing. And then I got some tattoos. And my hair was longer. And so I got a lot of judgment from that within my family of just like, what are you doing? Like, you were on this great path and you went to this top whatever school. Like, why are you making these choices? And that really sucked. It definitely didn't feel good and definitely didn't feel nice to know, like, feel that I wasn't welcome. Not necessarily welcome, but just that, like, I would feel that kind of pressure on me. But eventually, like, it's a stereotypical thing, especially for, like, the Latinx thing where it's, like, there's, like, a culture of macho, and there's that whole idea that, like, you're supposed to be the man, and you're supposed to, like, do this thing. And so I was not doing that, I guess, and necessarily in my grandma's eyes, and that's what she was kind of used to. And I don't think I did a good job of this now, but or at the time at least. But now I kind of think and I wish I would have just like tried to break that down for her a little bit and be like, hey, actually, that's kind of whack. Like being a macho like Latinx dude is like not really cool, actually. And honestly, like it perpetuates a lot of really bad things. And so had I been a little bit smarter, maybe I would have thought of that at the time. But I definitely ran into a lot of like judgment from my own family, which felt kind of lame to be like, wait, this is the place that I want to feel welcome, and maybe I'm not because like I have red in my hair or something.
God.
She doesn't care now.
Yeah. I think in the same, like, the macho, like, having to be macho, like, I've discovered, like, I've always been used to my parents and relatives thinking my worth was if I could cook, if I could clean, and if I was gonna get married and have children to continue the family line, all that fun stuff. But I was always kind of used to it, but I think the one time it weirdly affected me more was when I did a talk at, like, a big games conference. And I sent them the video, and my mom was like, "Oh, you've gained weight." I was like, "Okay, that's okay." And then, like, my other relatives were like, "Oh, you look so pretty, but, you know, are you exercising still?" And I was like, they're, like they didn't focus on the stuff I was actually doing. They were focusing on how I looked. And then when I came back, they were like, "Oh, but, like, can you cook? Like, is that still a thing that's happening?" So yeah, I think it's like the ideal of, like, what a perfect wife I should be was, like, really, like, for some reason that affected me more. And I'm used to, like, them saying things like, because they don't have the words for it and because they grew up in really, let's say, strict atmosphere, like, one of their, like, favorite insults is like, "Oh, we found you in the trash because you're kind of trash." And I was like, "Oh, I can't believe you said that." But I understand it's a terrible way to, like, talk to your kids, but it's something I'm used to. But yeah, that made me sad. But
That would make me sad too.
right? Oh my God! But
You're definitely not trash.
well, thank you. No. But it's something where it's like I've learned how to talk to them about it, and, like, how it disappointed me that they focused on my looks rather than what I was doing, and it actually kind of worked. Like, they're very receptive to it now. So I think, like, even when they say things that make you kind of sad, you have to tell them sometimes when it hurts, even though that also feels weird to say.
And they're probably not used to that, right? Because they didn't have that kind of relationship with their parents, or the culture was different than what you're growing up on.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. So I just have, like, a list of questions. If anyone wonders why I keep looking over here, I would say
It was actually just a live feed of the Nintendo booth up there.
Oh yeah, I'm just like, when is the line for Animal Crossing going to just shorten?
Never.
Yeah, so do you have any, I guess, tips for explaining your work or explaining yourself to your relatives, let's say? Not necessarily your parents, but just explaining what you do and, like, kind of dealing. I don't know how many relatives you have. I have a lot. Like, they always ask questions about the work, and it's always confusing. And is there a way that you can, like, break it down to them or make them understand?
In my case, I have 70, 80 relatives in the Maryland area. Huge family. One of the reasons I wanted to move out of there is just there's always drama. When you have a big family, there's always big drama. So when I see them now, which is once or twice a year, which is perfect, it's more from, I try to explain from, like, oh, I run a business, right? I have a small studio, I run a business, and we're doing okay. Like, I kind of talk more about that than the actual content of making games. But so they understand the business part of it. That's how I deal with it.
Yeah. My strategy is to bribe them with free con swag. And like, I'm partially serious. I remember coming from E3 and I just had, like, a bunch of, like, random trinkets, and, you know, I played this game. It had, like, battle royale elements and, like, cooperative and competitive elements, and it's like none of those words mean anything to my dad. So it's like, hey, they gave me a free bottle opener and some whiskey stones. You want to, like, just like, and, you know, that kind of, like, helped break the ice. And, you know, I just kind of told the play-by-play of, like, what being a journalist at E3 was, and just trying to distill those concepts without kind of, like, getting into the nitty-gritty of what games are about. And, you know, it just helps them to give them a big picture, I think. So I kind of so when the ESA leak happened, because I was at E3, so my information was out there. No one look it up, please. And I had to explain to my parents, hey, this is why we might get some bad junk mail or whatnot. So trying to explain the entire, like, socio-political landscape of the video games industry and like all the discourse behind that, and relating to it to kind of alt-right movements that they read about in the news all the time. That kind of like helped them connect the dots a little bit. So that was kind of my strategy.
I think I had like two things happen. One was I went straight to the kids of the family, and that was actually like really helpful because like my little cousins think I'm the coolest person ever because I work at video games, and I was at this cool Nintendo event, and I went to the launch of that kind of stuff. And so that kind of like disseminated throughout the family of like, oh yeah, he's doing a really cool thing, and like my 8-year-old cousin thinks like this was really awesome, and I brought her a thing. So the swag thing definitely worked. But I also think Victoria, you mentioned this earlier, just like sharing those successes, no matter how like big or small those things are actually really good. Just try and contextualize those for them. I also brought my mom to a Nintendo event once, and that was really fun. We actually were talking about this because we tried to do this at PAX South. It didn't actually work out super well, but like bringing people into the space and letting them see it for themselves is actually really cool. And so like got to bring my mom to this thing. I didn't necessarily tell my bosses at the time that my mom was my camera operator, but she got to enjoy a cool event. She got to see it. We had a good time, and she felt like she saw me being an important person in my habitat, and whatever that is, like whether that's like if you're streaming or if you're competitive and you go to tournaments and stuff, like your parents are always going to want to see you succeeding or at least doing something cool outside of the box. And so like don't be afraid to invite them or bring them in. In my case, it worked really well. So
just bring them into a GameStop count.
Maybe. I haven't been in one in a while. So.
If your game's on the shelf, some of mine.
Yeah, actually.
Totally.
What if you just took a game off the shelf, put your game like cover on it, and just been like, "Hey, look, see, it's there. You can buy it."
Yeah, just tell them you worked
It's like $80.
Tell them you worked on Smash.
Yeah, tell them you made Minecraft.
There you go.
That's fine. That's good. Yeah, we'll get to questions soon, but I guess it's kind of like a last-ish question, unless I think of something else. So we talked about some bad stuff, but how have your parents ever said anything that helped you or that has really stuck with you in terms of like your work or yourself or anything?
Something I've said that's been bad, or
No,
Okay.
like something positive with your parents. So we're not just hating on them all
Yeah,
the time.
so my mom moved back to Sri Lanka, so I don't see her that often. We try to go back and forth, but I upgraded her flight last time in December, so she flew. She was like, "Oh, so you must be doing well," and it was like first class is expensive, but international is real expensive. So it was not like a small thing, but I was like, it's my mom, and I don't do this that often, so. So she was like, "Oh, okay, all right, you're doing all right."
I guess just keep it short and simple. That my mom just always told me just pursue what makes you happy, and I'd like to think that we're kind of getting to an age where parents are a little more tolerant in their children kind of just finding whatever satisfies them, like whatever career path satisfies them. I'd like to believe that. I can't speak for everyone, but I just feel kind of lucky that my parents are just that way towards me.
I think one thing my mom always taught me was actually just to like, she's kind of like shameless, and so is the rest of my family in a way that like I can't even possibly imagine. Like there are things that my mom would do that like would make me want to disappear right now. Like just put like duct tape on the bumper of the car because like we didn't have the money to like fix it, or like just give you some like old shoes from like somebody that was like your cousin's friend or whatever. And like that lack of shame actually I think is actually really important, and something that I've gravitated towards as I've gotten older. I used to be like super worried about appearances and like what people thought of me at school and things like that. And the thing that she has always reminded me is like, who cares what they think about this thing? If you're really passionate about it, that passion is going to show through. And so like, really care about that thing, really get into it, which is kind of like weird to think about that. I was so like shameful before, but like I would not hesitate to do the same thing now. Like I'm not spending $800 to fix this bumper. Get the hell out of here. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the thing my parents taught me, I mean, they taught me a lot, obviously, they're parents, but one thing that has stuck in my mind was, so my mom lives in Vancouver, I live in Montreal, and she came to visit me. And the minute she got off the plane, she's like, Victoria, and comes out and pulls out a mango from her bag, and it's like, I got this for you. And I was like, am I eating it now? She's like, yes. And she like finds a knife in her check bag to cut it for me in the airport. And I was like, Mom. She's like, no, you need to eat. It'll be great. And she pulls out a star fruit, and then she had like a half-eaten muffin. She was like, I saved some for you. And it's just like the thought, and something I just kind of brought with me now, and it's like, I'm always kind of trying to think of other people and seeing like how I can kind of just brighten their day a little bit, even if it's something like I brought you a mango, which I haven't done before, and maybe I should. But yeah, it's just like small little things that makes you remember like, okay, they might not say like I love you all the time, but they have actions that show me that they do care, even if we fight or whatever. So it's like something I appreciate a lot. Yeah.
And I feel like it comes through in your like comms as well. Like that idea of just like those little things that you're doing for your community and for other people, and like that thing definitely comes from them, and maybe you don't always think about it that way. Like, I definitely feel the same way now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Victoria's mom.
Thanks, Victoria's mom. So I guess I'll open the floor if there's any questions. There's a mic. Yeah, go to the mic, please, so you don't have to yell, and also so people can hear your question.
Yeah.
So polite. Oh, okay. Yeah, you can line up at the microphone. Yeah. Okay.
Testing.
No.
Okay. Talking. There we go.
There we go.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
So a lot of the stuff you've mentioned with your parents has been to the point where you've actually told them. How do you get the specifically with like the family of my significant other? I've been to 8 Christmases. Every time I'm like, I'm doing this marketing stuff, this social media stuff. Never mentioned the games. How do you even begin? Like, what are the things that I should tell myself to pump myself up and to even bring it up?
Interesting. So, I mean, okay, so when I decided to pivot from healthcare to marketing, the way I did it, and I'm not sure it's the greatest way, is I explained it in the most convoluted way possible. So they had no idea what I was doing. I was like, so I'm basically going to be handling the entire communications for this studio. It's very important. Doing PR, marketing, social.
That's what I don't want to do.
Yeah, right? It's just, honestly,
Buzzwords.
it's so much. Look, if you're getting to social media, you need to know how to market yourself. So that's what I did.
It's really just the family that, like, my significant other is going to judge me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're not gonna understand completely anyway. But if it's just pumping yourself up, it's usually not going to be as bad as you think it is. I think. For me, it was that case. It's like because you always imagine the worst case scenario, and chances are that's never going to happen.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yes, good luck.
So further on that, though,
Please report back.
I think you have the right inkling there, which is like you don't have to break it down completely and like lay it all out for them. Like it can just be something as generic as like, hey, I do marketing for a company. Like that's okay. It would be cooler to bring them into it later, but like the amount of work it's going to take for you to explain all of the different nuance that they just don't even understand about the thing is like maybe not even worth doing at that point. And so I think you're kind of on the right track, honestly. Yeah, they don't have to get it. Like if you're succeeding and you're happy with it, like it's cool.
And I mean, you're going to be talking to them for a while, right? So just
hopefully
little
more
bits.
Christmases.
Just dole out little bits at a time. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, panel.
Hi.
Hello.
So, what was the first thing that your parents interacted with that you did? For example, so I write too, right? And the first thing, I had been writing for years before my mother realized like what I was writing and where I was writing. And she found it on the Playboy website. Because I've been published by Playboy a couple of times. And that was the first time a name recognition happened for her, where she realized, he's not just writing on a blog that he runs. Sometimes people pay him to do this.
All right.
But it was for Playboy. So I had to tell her, oh, yes, in 2015 or whatever, Playboy tried to make a video games thing on the internet. They tried to make an internet version of the magazine that had less of the naked stuff. But that took a couple years to get her into this idea that, I'm not actually writing smut for Playboy. I'm doing other things for Playboy. But it was a weird interaction because that was the first thing she really found, maybe not found herself, but it was the first thing she found that I didn't show her. Yeah. That I had my name on it.
Right.
But it was not like the best thing I wanted her to see first. Even though I wasn't writing anything shameful, it was just, how do you get the stigma away from a person who doesn't have any interaction with it? So I wonder if you guys had any sort of weird, I guess, friction when it came to you making things and them finding it on their own, or...
Yeah, I mean,
I would say I would have controlled the message a little bit more there, just to make sure that she didn't
it was shared to her, and I was like, but I didn't take any pictures or anything. Yeah. It has nothing to do with that.
It's a great story.
I love this. I love this story.
It's a good one. I think if I knew that there was a risk of that happening, I might have gotten ahead of that a little bit just to make sure. Because in all cases, I'm trying to make sure that I'm controlling that flow of information to give them the best picture of what's happening. I could imagine if I worked at a studio or something that had something happen at it. I wouldn't want my mom to figure out that I worked at a studio or what was going on there before
you talked to her. Yeah.
I talked to her about it. So
yeah, I have a similar story because our studio is working on a game called Boyfriend Dungeon, and I was in my so I saw an article in Vietnamese came out about the game, and I was like, amazing, finally my parents can understand what I do. Sent it to them, and they're like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, it still doesn't make sense in Vietnamese. I get it. Okay, never mind. So I've been in that place where they've just discovered it on their own, or I guess I kind of helped them discover it, and it was kind of awkward, but it's honestly just kind of showing them the things afterwards, and they'll always kind of remember it in this really cringy way, but you just keep showing them other successes you've had, other things you've done, and then you can kind of control where they're thinking. But if you don't have photos on there, they won't know.
Follow up with some other stuff.
Yeah, follow up with other stuff.
Yeah, I have nothing but bad advice to give. I just depend on my parents' inability to Google search things because
same.
So I'm non-binary and I'm not really out to them. So sometimes they might find a byline in a bio that has they/them pronouns, and that just kind of. But so I do kind of feed them some stuff, and again, just trying to make it something they relate to. I had a piece about PAX Unplugged since it was in Philly. It was in the local Philly paper, and I just kind of slid to them and hey, look at the returns of what I'm actually doing. Nothing but bad advice from me, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, panel.
Hello.
Hello.
I am very sleepy, so please excuse me. But my question today was, Chris, I very much relate to the they-them struggle. That's why I'm even wearing a Bowsette hat today for the entirety of PAX. So my question was, have any of you in any situation ever had to manipulate the social capital of a situation to get it across to your parents? So what I mean by that is you were making something in relation to an issue. I work for Pratt Institute personally, and I work on a lot of student theses. But my parents, they have a very weird concept, complex about this because both of their parents were really successful people within their own right. My mother's father was a psychiatrist who was very successful in Los Angeles. And my grandmother was someone who went from factory work to be the first woman to graduate from UCLA. So to reel this back to the question, I'm just wondering, have you guys ever had to manipulate the social capital of what you're doing to look better to your parents than it would sound to them if you just said it?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of what you said? So you said social cap. How do you explain the social capital?
So the way I explain the social capital is what I'm getting at is my parents do not like the...
Sorry, can you come closer to the mic?
My parents...
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Great. My parents do not like the idea of me helping students with their finals because they see it as like beneath me. But instead, I've pitched that to them as like, well, I'm introducing art students to like virtual reality technology. And then they think that's great.
So is the question like how we pitch our...
Yeah, like the question is, have you ever been in a situation where you had to like talk about your job, but you had to talk about it in a way where you knew your parents would be more approving of it?
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Before I worked in games, I worked in New York City as a for-hire art director, and some of the projects I worked on were terrible.
Yeah.
And I was not getting paid a lot of money, and it was not a good working situation, but like they were with cool clients, and so I'd be like, hey, I worked with like A$AP Rocky. Isn't this guy cool? And
Yeah,
she's
right.
like, I don't know who that is, but like,
Yeah.
sure, he's on Spotify. And so I definitely kind of, I'm not going to tell her the entirety of why I took that gig. It doesn't necessarily look that good, that I wasn't necessarily getting paid a lot of money for it, and I was doing it for, that kind of stuff. But I definitely tried to take the best part of it and like put it in front of her to make her feel better about that. And I think that's okay. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I would think about, overall, like you don't want to necessarily feel like you're lying a ton, but at the same time, like positioning it in a way that makes it feel better, I think is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, or tell my parents, oh, I'm working with Microsoft or working with Sony or whatever, and that's just all they, that part is what they care about, and not the real details.
Okay, no, I'm going to cut off so we can get more
Yeah,
questions.
no, thank you
Like
very
12
much.
minutes left.
Yeah.
Sorry, cool. You're good.
And this is totally a lunch conversation.
Hey, my name is Patrick. How y'all doing?
Sorry, could you get a little closer? Yeah.
A little bit closer to the mic?
perfect.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
All right, my name is Patrick. How are y'all?
Great.
Good.
Okay,
All right,
thank
cool.
you.
So my question is, a while ago, I was having issue, like, getting new releases in games, and I decided to institute a games for life policy whenever I purchase games now. Like, something that I don't really want to spend money on unless I know I can just, like, continually get entertainment out of it. So if you had a games for life list, like what would be like your first entry onto your games for life list?
Games I would play for the rest of my life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
Got it. Done.
That's a good one.
Probably one of the Zelda games. It'd be hard to pick one, but
Breath of the Wild.
All right. Can I pare it down a little bit? Like,
Okay.
if it's part of a series, you have to pick a specific entry in the series.
But the New Horizons isn't out yet, so I can't say.
can you ask again in a couple weeks?
Yes, ask again in a couple of weeks.
For me, it's Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Night in the Woods is the first thing that came to my mind, I think.
What's on your list?
Top one.
Top one, probably Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning.
Interesting.
I really liked it felt more like a beat 'em up than like something that could have been like an RPG, an MMORPG or anything.
You should talk to this guy on the row over here. He got super stoked when you said that.
Yeah.
He was like,
It was good. The Lord,
you guys got to be friends.
yeah,
Okay,
they blew
wait.
all their budget.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey there. So, I'm Cuban American, and I come from like an environment where a lot of success is seen as like landing a 9-to-5 like corporate job. I'm like a sound designer though, so like all my gigs are like based off like contract work and stuff. I was like wondering like what's the best way to like quell familial anxiety regarding like I guess inconsistently getting paid pretty much.
I did that for a while, and I justified it from my perspective as like I'm taking different gigs and I'm starting to like build up my skills, right? Like working for one place means like you might just be pigeonholed from sound design. You might just like only do dialogue, or you might like only do music or something like that. And so I was like doing all sorts of creative jobs, and yeah, it wasn't very consistent, but like I got to do a bunch of different stuff that leveled me up in different ways. And so that's how I kind of pitched it. I was like, it's a little tough right now, Ma. I might have to move home, but like I'm working on these really cool projects. Like I just edited a movie, so that's cool, right? So that was my perspective on it. Just like I want to I want to do different
nice.
things, and that's going to help me later on, like have different perspectives and level up my skills. So
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Good. The variety is it's really nice, right? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like as like a writer, I'm kind of doing a bunch of multiple things just as a necessity because that's why I have so many bylines because I'm just kind of like pitching a lot of pieces around and getting just kind of piecemeal stuff, and I'm still searching for like some full-time 9-to-5 desk job, like whatever I can get, just the health benefits, the 401k, what have you. So just trying to be practical, but also trying to like build up that skill set.
Yeah, I just think it's like a little tough because like I just kind of like graduated out of like I guess like university, and it's been a few months, and my parents are like, hey, where are the jobs?
Yeah, they're not always right there. Like I got into games when I was 30. I had been doing a bunch of different stuff before that, and like I had a lot of fun doing that. But like it took years for me to actually find the lane that I was really excited about and explore that. And so I know that pressure kind of sucks, but like you also don't want to get into a situation where you're forcing yourself to like have a 9-to-5 that's not that great, and then you're not happy. Like that sounds even worse. So I would kind of look at it from that perspective of like, hey, I know you want to see this from me right now, but I still got to like keep doing the thing and keep kind of putting myself out there.
Yeah, and hopefully you're doing what you love to do too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Casey. I'm Filipino and Brazilian, so like the left side of this panel. It's great to see y'all here. I really want to write for video games. My parents are cool with whatever as long as I make money. But I got really excited, Chandana, when I saw that you're a creative director because I'd really love to work my way up to be that. And I'm just kind of curious about what that was like. Like, I know everyone's path is different, but what was that like for you? Like, what was the ladder to get there? And do you have any advice for someone who might want to do that?
It's you.
Oh,
For you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was for you.
Sorry. What's the last part? Say it again.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're having a hard time hearing up here.
No, it's okay. I'll get closer. I know everyone's path is different, but what was the ladder like for you to work your way up to being a creative director, and do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think for me, I started as an artist, and it's after several projects, like I just got more responsibilities, and I really, for me at least, it's always been I end up doing the job before I get the title. And I think that's probably usually the way it works. People like recognize what you're doing, and then they're like, "Oh, we should just make him the art director now," and then or producer, whatever, creative director. I don't feel like I've really got to do my own thing till I started my own company because there's specific sort of underrepresented games that I want to do, and I think of the 5 companies I worked at, they were all mostly white male led companies, or the teams are mostly that. So. Even though I've led projects before, like I feel like in the last 3 years when I started my own company, that's when I really be able to found my voice and be able to do the games I wanted to do. It depends on what you want to do, but like I think trying to find that part of the games, it's a good time to be in games right now because there's a lot of different avenues and there's funding for different things, and like Joe was saying earlier, there's like your unique perspective and your upbringing. It's something that people want for. Like when I'm pitching new projects, we're doing one about arranged marriage, which is
what?
Yeah, I'll tell you about it later. So like that's for me on the couple of pitches we have recently because I'm doing pitching around right now for a bunch of people, and that's the one that's farthest out there, and that's the one people are responding to the most, and I was surprised. And so there's like just sort of the diversity and different cultures and things are kind of hot right now. So we're kind of hot right now in the industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think to follow up on that too, like I actually really respect what you did, right? Where you felt like you had something to say and you wanted to put that thing out there, and you didn't necessarily like wait for an opportunity to pop up at a big studio where you felt like maybe that wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Like you just like struck out and said, I think this is super important, and I think you did a great job, by the way. So
yeah, if you can find ways to get people to give you money to do the thing you want to do, it's like the best.
Of course. Okay, so we have 5 minutes, but go.
Hi, I'm asking this from the perspective of someone who's pursuing the games industry. I was wondering what it was like being a person of color or being raised in an immigrant household has affected your journey to where you guys are today.
How has being raised in a what household?
Like being a person of color or being raised in an immigrant household affected your journey today? Because I'm part of an immigrant household as well, so like wondering how it would look like someone like me to enter the game industry.
For me, it was that I grew up not knowing I could be in games and that was a viable career path and that it existed at all. So I feel like I came in with no real knowledge of games that much. Like, I wasn't allowed to have a console. So I had to play a lot of games on PC and just like a lot of Flash games. So coming into games, I actually didn't know, like I've never played Dark Souls, I've never played The Witcher, like I don't get the references a lot of the times when people say it. So it seems like I would be like very alienated, but I found that coming from like my household and stuff, it's that I actually have now different skills that, again, I can bring up and that people are more interested in because they want new creative ideas and they want to know about your background and to learn about like where you came from, because that's honestly like so much of games is personal, and I find that people like that a lot. So coming from like my household, like that's kind of something that's come up a lot.
Yeah, it feels more authentic when you're doing the things that you believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So, do you find any sort of difference in attitudes with regards to, I suppose, quote unquote, more creative positions versus like less creative positions? For example, I don't know, coding for games and such, where it's not so much as sort of you have to think of this sort of thing.
For us, it depends on the team. Like for our size, everyone ends up contributing to the design and the vision of the game because unless it's, I guess it's on a bigger AAA team, but like you end up, there's so much that, overlap. Even though you're comms, you probably do, give a lot of feedback to the games and you're probably involved a lot. So I think you end up being creative if you're on a game team, like just by working on the thing you're working on. There's always problems to solve. And sometimes even the coders, there's like gameplay design and problems to solve on every aspect. So like it's a very creative field. I don't, regardless of the discipline. So.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're writing code, you're still thinking about how the player is going to experience a thing. You're thinking about how it fits into the overall design. And so like for our team, we make sure those people are embedded with each other and they're learning from each other, because like you could write some gameplay and then realize that like actually it doesn't fit with the rest of the gameplay. Like you might have solved the problem that was in front of you, but like it doesn't actually work with the rest of the game. So you definitely have to be creative, and no matter where you are in a game studio.
And you have to learn to work with people. Like that's the biggest thing that none of the schools really teach you if you want to be in games. It's like you're going to be collaborating. And if you're terrible with working with people, you're going to have a really hard time, unless you're a solo dev. But a lot of
you have to do those biz dev deals.
A lot of your time is working, trying to like push and pull, give and take with other folks. So it's
okay. Thank you. Last question. We have 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Hey, so I'm starting like sort of a journey creating my own game studio. I also work another job. I don't really have any money to hire other people. And personally, I don't really like social media. I don't really like using it. It's just, I don't know, it's just not for me, I guess. So I find, spending time, marketing games through social media to be, not for me. And, I'd much rather spend it working on like the creative side of making the game and that sort of thing. So do you have any tips for me or things, maybe like the efficacy of focusing on one platform, anything like that?
It depends on what type of game you're making and what the audience is, and are you self-funding it, or are you looking for funding? There are a lot of people, like we work with an external firm to help us with PR marketing, like plan. Like I'm big on Twitter, but like they help me plan stuff out. So it doesn't have to be all internal or, do it on yourself. You can find other folks to, like when we hire folks or work with partners, it's things that we're not good at. So we try to complement that way too, if that's something you're interested in.
Just really quickly, because I said time. I think it's going to be kind of hard, honestly. Part of making a game is finding that audience and bringing those people together and getting feedback from them. Like Asheneer is an early access game, and I don't think we would be the game we are now if we didn't open up our development to people and let them know what was going on and bring them in and see what worked for them. And so I think it's going to be hard, definitely, to not work on that kind of thing. I think as far as platforms go, Twitter is really good. All they did in the beginning was just share a bunch of GIFs of what they're working on and let that disseminate to other people. But I think it's it's going to be kind of tough if you're not like thinking about your audience and bringing them in, no matter where it is, on social or emails or shows or anything like that. So.
Yeah, Twitter's kind of a necessary evil, unfortunately. But that's honestly, like, as someone who kind of works at an outlet that focuses on indie stuff, we kind of find things like through all the hashtags that people are using, we find those GIFs and just kind of like finding the trail of like, oh, who actually made this, and trying to connect with them. So it's kind of a rabbit hole, but it's something worth at least kind of dipping your toes in.
You can filter your feed and just focus on very specific things. You can have a very good experience on Twitter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Everyone.